Hey all, welcome to your first year of drum lessons, week 27, drumpad edition. My name is Penny Larson and I am happy to have you with me today. Today we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into hand technique. We're going to talk about finger control technique, which is most often associated with French grip, which we'll talk about in a second. But you can always also think of finger control as something that you're going to use for things like double stroke rolls or multiple notes with the same hand, even when you're using a flatter hand position. And working on finger control technique can be very useful in developing your fingers. I'm gonna do a little shout out today to a website called Online Drummer. I use some of their materials in my teaching and I recommend their site to a lot of my students. We're going to do an exercise that's specifically based around building some hand speed. We're going to kind of break down that exercise and talk about what's going on and why it works and how we could even do the exercise in a more extended way. And then we're going to look at this snare solo called Rothwell Town, which I use with almost all of my beginner, as they're kind of getting used to reading, students. I've talked about this in the past, there's this thing that I like doing, which is taking these really small snippets and working them over and over again. And making sure you're learning how to read and how to play based on shorter segments. Playing actual pieces, snare solos, songs on the drum set, is a different animal. And in some ways, that's going to proceed a little bit more slowly than your ability to play a two-measure piece. The examples that we did last week in our reading review, some of those are a little weird and awkward and had some like chopsy stuff that's tricky to do. Rothwell Town, difficulty-wise, is probably a step down, but it's a whole page. And like always, there's going to be a link to these examples down below in the doobly-doo. The difference is going to be they're not my exercises. I'm going to be linking to Online Drummer, which we've done a couple times in the past, like with Crazy Army. I sent you to the website where that was. But before we even talk about that exercise and that piece, let's talk about this technique that I described as finger control technique. So finger control is literally just using your fingers and nothing else to move the stick. I've talked about a bunch that when I'm playing, I'm thinking pretty much about a unified motion with my hands and my fingers, and I'm not thinking too much, oh, this technique, that technique, that technique, when I'm on the drum set or even when I'm playing something on the drum pad. And I think most people aren't, right? Like working on these techniques is more about just building your dexterity and your facility. That said, finger control specifically is something that as an adult, I have probably spent the least time working on. Maybe molar, which we're going to touch on at some point too. But these to me are sort of special cases. I find this finger control technique is useful, especially when I'm playing on the ride cymbal and I can put my thumb on top, or the hi-hat and my thumb on top. But even then, I'm not really doing a finger control technique, right? Which literally what I'm trying to do is keep my forearm and my wrist still and just move. You can see, hopefully on that side camera, I'm just moving. What I'm doing is I'm trying to keep my forearm and my wrist still, my wrist pretty much locked, and make that motion just with my fingers. And you want to be able to do it slowly and quickly. This technique excels for high speed chops. The world's fastest drummer videos, which if you haven't checked out, check out on YouTube. They're fun. The people who tend to win the fastest drummer awards are usually using some sort of finger control technique. And that just has to do with your smaller muscles move more quickly than your bigger muscles. It's easier to do this than do this that fast, right? So it doesn't really make one better or the other. The reason we're going to work on this separately is just to talk about building your fingers. And so when we want to go really fast, using just our finger control technique can be helpful, though usually a negative about finger control is it tends to be a little quieter. I mentioned that finger control is often associated with French grip, and that's because with French, we have our thumbs on top. There's a movement of foot, or at least I've heard some people talking about renaming the grips, right? We've got German, which is our hands flat, and French with our thumbs on top, and then American, which is kind of the blend of the two. I've seen some discussion about renaming them just, hands flat, thumbs on top, 45-degree angle kind of thing. I don't super care what you call them, but this thumbs on top, is usually associated with this finger control technique. A lot of times I see when people put their thumbs on top, they still use their wrist in this kind of motion. And if you think about what your wrist is doing, think about, right, we've got our two bones in our forearm. This is a motion that your wrist just does not like, right? You want to keep to this motion as much as you can, and that's why when we turn our hand sideways for French grip, we're going to mostly move our fingers and not our wrist, okay? An exercise I used to do, and this will probably be bad, I'm warning you now, but do a few notes with each finger, right? So here I'm just pulling with my middle finger. Here I'm just pulling with my ring finger. And here I'm just pulling with my pinky. The reality is I'm also doing some of this motion with my index finger and my thumb rolling on top of each other. And to a certain extent, the stick is just rolling on that fulcrum, but the fulcrum is also kind of rolling itself. And I don't have as much strength there, right? Which is why getting the other fingers involved really helps keep finger control from being purely about quiet playing. And I can change the angle a little bit of my fulcrum, right? Finger control technique is one of the techniques that can be useful as you need to move to other surfaces too. One of the things I want to demonstrate, a lot of times people have trouble with this idea of keeping their hand still while playing, while moving the stick just with their fingers. Sorry. Keeping your wrist still, keeping your forearm still. And so the demonstration that I like the best is just find a flat surface. I'm going to use a drum head box. Put the drumstick on it, put your fingers on it, and move the drumstick just with your fingers and then you're continuing that motion. Okay, you can use a wall. A lot of times in lessons I have students use the music stand, any flat surface. I guess I do have just enough room to do it on the drum pad. And that'll give you the idea of what motion you're trying to get. Like I say, for me, this is a technique, and I don't have a lot of exercises that I do or teach with just, hey, let's play an exercise with finger control technique. Outside the, hey, let's play, a little bit with each finger. This is kind of like isolating emotion more than its own usable technique that you would do much with outside of very specific cases. Okay, so like I say, I tend not to teach exercises around just finger control technique. But through this year, I want to make sure you are aware of different ways that we can control the stick. Last week, when we talked about the building up your left hand, and I showed you this exercise, you can see I'm doing some funky stuff with opening my wrist, and my wrist is kind of doing almost like a this thing, right? Right, so I'm opening my hand. While my hand is open, I'm definitely using some finger control in there. But it's a part of the motion. It's not just this. Okay, so work on this a bit. When we talk about molar, either next week or within the next couple weeks, we're going to have a similar discussion. I feel very similarly about finger control and molar in that they're important techniques to learn, and they will help your overall technique, but in and of themselves, they're not super useful outside of very specific cases. If you're trying to win world's fastest drummer, really bust out your finger control technique. Okay, having said that, let's talk about our exercise from onlinedrummer.com. And again, there'll be a link to this down below. I like this one because it's pretty simple. We're going to use 30-second notes and 16th notes. And that's it. And we're going to do 2 different stickings. In the first 3 lines, we're going to use just alternating sticking. And then in the 4th, we're going to add some doubles. And then in the bottom, we're going to put everything together. This is a pretty straightforward exercise once you get over the fact of 30-second notes, right? We've been using 30-second notes for double strokes. We haven't really done them much as single strokes. Remember that I can count 30-second notes 1 E, right? So if this was 30-second notes, 1 E and 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1. All I'm doing is counting 16th notes with my right hand and then putting my left hand in the middle, and that way I'm getting 30 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, okay? And this might be a time when I might invoke some of that finger control that I just complained about, although I find that if I try and shift back and forth between finger control and let's call my standard technique, that can get a little wonky. It's almost when you try and sing from your chest voice to your head voice, you get like a little crack in there. So shifting can be a little weird. So maybe this exercise specifically, I don't like doing that, and I'll show you why. So the first line, measure 1, I'm going to have 4 16th notes and then, 4 30-second notes and then 6 16th notes, and 4 30-second notes and 6 16th notes, just back and forth. 1 E, 1 E, and 2 E, and 3 E, and 4 E, and 1 E, and 2 E, and 3 E, and 4 E, and in measure 2, the second line, I'm going to do that 4 32nd note pattern 3 times, which means I'm going to have 4 and then 2 16th notes, and then 4 32nd notes and 2 16th notes, and then 4 32nd notes and 6 16th notes, and that sounds like this. And then we're going to put those both together. So the third line, the first 2 lines, so measure 1 and measure 2 together, we get this. And last week we were talking about building our weaker hand, so let's also do this left hand lead. I'm going to do it a little slower because this is building my weaker hand. Okay. In the next line, now we're going to do those 32nd notes as double strokes. And this, in a lot of ways, makes the exercise easier because double strokes are, they're not cheating exactly, but they're 2 notes for the price of 1, kinda. So the 5th measure, 4th line, on the exercise it says same rhythm using double strokes, sounds like this. And again, we can do that starting with our left hand. And then the bottom of the page where he's written in the full Monty, go for it. We're going to go back and forth between the singles and the doubles. And that just sounds like this. So this is a great exercise. I love this. I'm totally going to mispronounce his name. Maybe not. Alex Ribchester. And again, on Online Drummer, there's some great exercises on Online Drummer. There's some great lessons, and there's a lot of drum charts that they have available there too. So Online Drummer is .com is a great resource. Why does this work? Why do exercises like this work? There's an exercise that I learned a while ago, and it's one of those exercises that I've kind of lost where I've learned it. You add 32nd notes to your 16th notes gradually. And so the first time you just play a whole measure of 16th notes. 1, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and then you add, and you have 1/8 note of 32nd notes at a time. If you added 1/16 note at a time, you can do that, but it'll change your sticking over to leading with the other hand. And that's a cool exercise. We're not going to talk about that exercise today. We're just going to do groups. We're going to add 2 left hands at a time so we can keep our right hand lead pattern, or left hand if we start with our left hand. So the second measure is 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, and 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E. And so the pattern is just you're adding an 1/8 note of 32nd notes. So instead of 1 E and a, now it's 1 E and a. Okay? And 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a. So I showed you this other exercise. Still didn't say, okay, so wait, why does this work? When you're trying to build speed, one of the most effective ways is short bursts, almost like a leap up, okay? Repeated over and over again. And so these little bursts of 32nd notes can help you to build your speed because you're working that little twitch motion that we need to play fast, and you're learning to control that twitch motion. If you just get your speed through twitching with no control, I hope I don't even need to say why that's bad, right? No control is bad. And so by doing these really specific, hey, I'm going to do, just a few 32nd notes here, or extending it for the whole measure, by doing it in that, kind of focused, methodical way, we can expand our ability to control 32nd notes. So then we can do as many as we need and stay relaxed, right? There's, I think we all have this gear that we use sometimes that even though we know we're supposed to stay relaxed all the time, we'll stretch for something a little bit faster. Either, it's where for me, usually it'll happen when I'm improvising and I'll think of something and it's like just on the edge of where I'm like, hey, I bet I can play that thing that fast. And I go for it and I'm pushing the line, right? And so sometimes it's that instinct to tense, even though, intellectually, well, wait, tensing is bad. And so when you're playing 32nd notes, the faster you want to go, the more relaxed you have to be, which is this really cool quote that Louis Bellson used to say a lot. And it's true. At the same time, our instinct is to tense, to push, right? If you do ever seek out the world's fastest drummer, I think there's a video on YouTube. I think it was 2012, maybe. Although I might be remembering how many notes he played in 60 seconds. Anyway, there's this thing called a drumometer or a drumometer. I bet it's drumometer because it's supposed to be like speedometer, right? And there's an app too that I think is by someone else, but it counts how many notes you play in a set amount of time, right? And it's neat, it's fun, but if you watch his winning performance, he's like total zen, relaxed, super chill, super cool for that whole, and he's just using the teeniest little motion with his fingers, right? The total finger control and his breathing is nice. And I mean, if you just looked at him, you wouldn't know he was in his head, he's like really concentrating and working hard, but his body is just like this limp noodle. So as you're working on these, you're going to feel an urge to tense. You're going to feel an urge to push. Remember that as you try and speed up, as you add beats of 30-second notes, the goal is to stay as relaxed as you can. If you feel like you want to use that finger control technique, when I'm playing this exercise specifically, I'm kind of opening my hand a little, but I'm also letting my wrist help a bit. Right? I'm going to try and exaggerate the motion a little so you can see it. Right, I'm not pulling my arms out that far when I'm really playing it. But I am kind of rolling my wrist over. And that's why I think working on finger control as like an isolated motion can be helpful, because then when I go to do this more compound motion, I have some strength with my fingers to pull on, right, to utilize. The last thing we're going to do today is a snare solo called Rothwell Town, also available on onlinedrummer.com, written by Tim Sawyer. This is a great little, top end of simple. It's still pretty simple. It's at a fairly brisk tempo, 130, 16th notes with some accents, fairly brisk. We'll play it at 130 so you can see how it sounds, but as we're running through it, we'll go more slowly. And I have most of my students go through this at some point in their lessons, because it's got a nice musical flow to it. It works some accents, it works some dynamics. There's an element in here that I don't know if we've talked about, so let's talk about. There are some ties in here. One note is tied to the next note. And what that means is you add the two notes together. The practical effect for drummers is almost as if you treat that second note as a rest, kind of, right? And that's, like I say, that's the practical effect. If we're talking about a roll, then a roll just ties to the next note and extends. Whereas in here we have some eighth notes tied to eighth notes that are just notes, and 16th notes tied to 16th notes that are just notes. Those come together and act like one note. So two eighth notes tied together would act like a quarter note. Two 16th notes tied together would act like an eighth note. The reason to use ties, and the reason he's using ties here, is if you have a note that stretches over a beat, so let's say I want to play a quarter note, but I want it to start on an and, sometimes that can be confusing to read. And even though putting in another eighth note and a tie technically is more notes on the page and it's more stuff to read, it can help your brain remember where the beat is as you're reading. Sometimes you're reading a quarter note that's on an and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. I could write those as quarter notes. The and after 4 would be an eighth note, right? So it would start with an eighth rest on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then that last and would be an eighth note. But those three notes in the middle I could make as quarter notes if I wanted to, and you see that. That's not an unusual thing to see. But a very common way to avoid any confusion is to use ties the way Tim has here. And this is a nice environment for us to first talk about that kind of ties. There's a lot of accents in this piece. There's a fair amount of dynamic shift. And there's a couple places where the dynamic shift is fairly sudden and quick. Let's just talk about it. So the top 4 lines really are dealing with this kind of motif. We've got this 3 accent pattern, 1 E and a, 2 E and a. And he is going to use that accent pattern through the piece. In the first 4 lines, it happens pretty much just like that as 16th notes. Let me play through. I'm going to count for you too. Let me play through the first 4 lines. We're starting out forte. The first 4 lines are all forte. We've got accents. 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and 4 and 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 4 E and a, 1 2 E and a, 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and 2 and 3 4. In the 3rd line, he brings that pattern back, da-ga-da-da-ga-da-da, and stops after that 3rd accent. So in measure 5, if I start on beat 3, I've got 3 E and a, 4 E and I stop on that 3rd accent instead of keeping the pattern going. It's a cool musical device. It's a cool way to keep that da 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 da, keep that accent pattern while changing up the underlying rhythm a little bit. Let's take the next few lines one at a time. The next line has our most aggressive kind of dynamic shifts in the piece. I've got piano and forte back and forth. Nice and slow. 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3, 4. For those shifts, especially when I'm doing the loud notes and then coming down for the soft notes, so in measure 9, I've got 4 16th notes on beat 4 that are forte. 4 E and a. Right, I've got to come right down. 4 E and a. 1, 2, 3. So I'm playing 2 full strokes. 4 E and then 2 downstrokes, right? 4 E and a. My technique centers on this low at rest position. So when I do this slow, it's almost hard to see that I'm playing full strokes because my at rest position is low anyway. Let me play this a little bit faster so you can see the how I'm getting into that down position for the quiet notes. Whole line starting at measure 9. 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 and a, 1, 2, 3, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3. The next line, pretty simple, just has some 8th rests and some 16th notes. Measure 13, and we're back at forte. Measure 13. 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 and a, 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a, 4 and a. Some repeating in there too, right? Measure 17, now we're down at mezzo forte, and we've got that accent pattern back, but now it shows up a little bit differently. 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1, 2, 3 and a, 4 E and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 E and a, 2 E and 3. The line that starts with measure 21, now we see our first tied notes. And he's doing this in a really sneaky way and a really cool way for us to work on. Measure 21, I have this rhythm. 1 and 2, 3 and a, 4 E and. In measure 22, I have the same rhythm except the 16th notes are tied. So what was in measure 21, 1 and 2, 3 and a, 4 E and, becomes 1 and 2, 3 and a, 4 E and. 3 and a, 4 E and, because I'm not playing the 4 because it's tied to the after 3. 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and. Same rhythm, but we're just adding a tie. So on the page it almost looks identical. You've got to pay attention to where that tie is. So if I do them back and forth, which conveniently, the line that starts with measure 21, we're going to go back and forth. We get 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and, 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and, 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and, 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and. Measure 25, we go back up to forte, and now we've got this thing we call a hairpin, and that is going to show us that we're getting quieter. And then we get to pianissimo, which is very quiet, and then we've got a crescendo hairpin. These long, we call them hairpins, these long either contracting or expanding, never quite parallel lines are ways in which we can demonstrate, hey, you're getting quieter here, or hey, you're getting louder here. They'll usually, not always, but they'll usually have a dynamic at the beginning and the end so you know where you're starting and where you're ending up. And if they don't have one, especially at the beginning, you just assume that whatever dynamic you had been playing, that's your starting point for either the decrescendo or diminuendo, it's also called, or crescendo. Likewise, at the end, sometimes you won't have a dynamic marking right at the end. The best thing to do is look and see if there's one further on in the piece and consider that to be where you're ending up after your decrescendo. When I'm writing, I try to have a dynamic marking at the beginning and the end of crescendos and decrescendos just for clarity. And Tim has done that for us here. So we're starting at measure 25. I'm starting at forte. I'm going to gradually get quieter to that pianissimo. And then for 2 beats, I'm just going to stay pianissimo. And then on the 3rd beat of measure 27, I'm going to start a crescendo. I have more ties in this line. And here, I haven't had them set up by the same rhythm. So let's talk about these ties. In measure 28 and 29, we see the same pattern, and it's 1 E and a 2 E and. The tie, similar to the line above, the tie goes from the to the beat, so I just skip the beat. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. Without the tie, the rhythm would sound like 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and. So I'm just leaving out the beat on 2 and 4 in both of those measures. Let's try just the line that starts with measure 25. 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and. Now I should be back to forte for the line that starts with measure 29. And I just have some more ties. Now they're 8th notes. So starting at 29, 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3 and 4. At measure 33, I'm at fortissimo, so 2 Fs, so very loud with accents. So now I've got to be thinking, okay, I'm playing pretty loud. I've got to be making my accents louder than that. This is a lot of work. But we're back to our pattern that we started with. Da ba da ba da ba da ba da. Now it repeats 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And then the last little bit, I've got a piano and then a crescendo to fortissimo on that last note. This is a bear. 2 E and 3, right? But at tempo, right? So you've got to get pretty quiet on 2 and be thinking, right, that you're building each note. Let me play the last 2 lines for you. 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Okay, it's a fun piece. I love playing this piece. I love students working on this piece. I'm going to play through it twice for you. Once we'll do it at, I don't know, 100 beats per minute, and then we'll do it up at 130. 1, 2, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Okay, and now at 130. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to play it for you without the metronome, and I'm gonna maybe let the tempo breathe a little bit. A lot of times with more legit pieces, the tempo can kind of breathe, to use that word. Practicing with a metronome is one of the most important things you can do for your timing, but playing without a metronome is also one of the most important things you can do for your timing. If you can't play with a metronome, that is hugely problematic. And if you can't play without a metronome, that can be equally problematic. I'm probably going to take it a teeny bit step down from there. I appreciate the tempo marking on the piece, and I love, it's different, right? When you have a quarter note equals at the beginning of the piece, you know exactly this is where the composer wants it. And that can be very helpful. When you have something like adagio or allegro or presto, which are those, nice classical music, legit tempo directions, those are more of a range, right? And they almost signify more of a feeling than a tempo specifically. Those give you a little bit more room for interpretation. Having said that, I'm going to take this down just a half step, right? So if 130 was like, Let's go like bum, 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 dub, 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 dub. I think it sits a little better, just a teeny bit slower. So now without a metronome, 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a. A link to this page and to these two, the exercise and the snare solo, will be down below. I really like Rothwell Town as a piece to play. It's just a fun, quick little, it kind of continues on what we were doing today, building some hand speed, thinking about staying relaxed. All those accents really force you to keep your hands relaxed. The ties keep you thinking, and the dynamics keep you thinking as well, and you have to adjust and follow those dynamics. That is going to wrap us up today. I appreciate y'all being with me still. In the next couple weeks, we're probably gonna change the format of these lessons just a teeny bit. I have some new gear, and we're gonna be treating these lessons a little bit more like a live stream, and I might actually live stream them, which is just going to enable me to spend a little bit less time in the editing bay and a little bit more time working on the lessons and also practicing myself. I was just talking to my best friend today, and I was saying how working on these lessons has kind of put a little bit of a damper on my own practice this year, and that's been the one negative, right? I had no idea how, well, of course, when I envisioned these, I envisioned like a couple 12-minute lessons a week. I had no idea I was going to be, recently we've had a couple lessons that have stretched to 75 minutes, right? Which is definitely not what I was intending. And I really appreciate that those of you who, watch to the bitter end of every lesson, either because you're just waiting for me to say the one useful thing I'll say during the lesson, or because, I don't know, you like looking at my t-shirts or something. But yeah, we're going to change a little bit the format. I am going to keep them kind of loose and kind of long. I got enough feedback that enough of you appreciate that format that we'll keep doing that. I am going to, one of the reasons I want to do a little bit less editing on these lessons and treat them more as live streams, maybe actually live stream them, is I want to do some more polished videos for y'all. Maybe some drum covers, maybe some more focused lesson type stuff. Still have those gear lessons coming soon. So yeah, there's that to look forward to. That might happen next week. It might happen later than next week. How's that for specificity? The reality is I got some new gear that I'm going to have to try and figure out and work that into my workflow, and I'm hopeful that I will be ready to do that next week, but maybe not. Something that I also wanted to mention to you guys is that I do Zoom lessons, right, and private instruction. And if you're finding these lessons helpful, I want to point out to you that these lessons are general in nature, and I am trying to reach a wide audience. And if you would like some direct instruction, which honestly I think is just higher quality because it has to be, right? Directed instruction is better than general instruction. Feel free to message me either here or at my Facebook or Instagram, which is at Penny Larson Drums, or at penny@pennylarson.net is my email. And we can talk about setting up some private lessons. I'm also going to be starting a Patreon page soon, and one of the perks will be that you will get these lessons a little earlier. You will also get more a higher priority of me answering your questions and emails. Although, in fairness, I kind of love doing that. So, at the moment, at least, the flow is small enough that I can pretty much answer every comment I get. I think I have. Okay. Yay, we've reached rambling phase. That means it's time to wrap it up. Okay, so I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I hope these lessons, this lesson was helpful. We've talked a bit about speed, right? And how building up speed is kind of this, it's a thing. And, there's all these glib comments that I really like that, if you can play it slow, you can play it fast. And speed is the result of good technique and blah, 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 blah. And okay, those are glib. And they're not wrong exactly. But so how do we what are those steps that we take to, and the hand speed exercise that we did second today, that's one of my favorite techniques, just kind of gradually throwing in quicker bits. I do that a lot with my double bass when I'm trying to build up stuff with my feet, is a little bit of a quick burst and then stretch out the quick burst and stretch out the quick burst, and gradually, before you know it, you can do it for an extended period of time. Okay, so that's going to wrap us up for today. On Friday, we are going to talk about, we're going to dive deeper into the ostinato patterns that we've been working on. And we're going to talk about the bossa nova pattern on the drum set. And depending on how long that takes, we might do something else too, but that might fill our whole lesson time. We will just have to see. So I will see you on Friday. I hope you are all staying safe and well and happy and practicing. And yeah, take care. Love you guys. Take it easy. Bye.